everyone present over here, the guests, my fellow speakers, and all of you lovely people who have assembled here to listen to some of us speak about some of the things that we have done, maybe in the past, or the ideas we sort of hold. Now, as we delve into this tapestry of geopolitics, growth, role of youth, a lot of these different words keep coming into our minds. But what is very important is that we see where we are heading from these terms. Right? Now, you all need to keep in mind that India's youth have certain sort of vision. Right? You have terms like determination, tenacity, growth that keep on coming into your minds, and that paves the way on how it moves forward. Now, this is a sort of line that I didn't come up, but something that ChatGPT told me to. And I was not in favor of taking that line, but then I thought, let me take that line to prove one point. That these sort of foundational models do give a lot of solutions sometimes, right? And make a lot of changes. And the company that got ChatGPT, OpenAI, its CEO Sam Altman came to India and said in one of the events that he was basically attending and speaking at, he said that it is totally hopeless to compete with us on training foundational models. You shouldn't simply try. And to this, the CEO of Tech Mahindra responded via tweet that, "Dear Sam, from one CEO to another, challenge accepted." This is broad framework, and I think this is something that depicts the India story, right? That we are taking up challenges now. But that is not the only part. If you look, for example, when we launched Chandrayaan 3, the total mission cost was approximately 600 crores, while the approximate cost of Avatar the Way of Water, another space movie, was approximately 3,800 crores. So you see the difference with which we are sort of operating. And as India is sort of coming forward, you see us taking more and more challenges with higher sort of efficiency and dealing with them as is needed. And in that sense of trajectory that we are seeing, there's a lot that is taking place. Broadly, when we talk about India becoming a superpower, right? That is the question. What has gradually happened is we keep on listening some of these speeches by our leaders. So for example, I remember Dr. S. Jaishankar sitting in Europe and somebody asked him that China keeps on doing some things on the border, now Russia has done something in Ukraine and you're not supporting us. How do you expect us to come to your help when something is taking place by China? And then he responds very eloquently. So, that China has been doing what it has been for past several years. It is not starting now, but Europe simply didn't care. Now, Europe needs to come out of this mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems. So, in that landscape, and when we keep on hearing these speeches and a lot of these efforts taken by the government, a lot of us, what we tend to do is sit back and say, okay, things are moving smoothly and things are going great, and I think we'll reach where we want to be. Though neither we are clear where we want to reach, nor our role in it. And we tend to depend on the government. So this is, I think, the sort of comfort zone that gradually encompasses everybody. When we see things moving smooth, we feel that, okay, right now we can relax, we don't have to put in any effort. And that's where sort of problem starts. Right? Now, ambitions, even when we talk about national ambitions, are on two stages, if I broadly, very broadly simplify the same. One, essentially those of the government in the nation where they want to holistically take it to, and second, of the people, what we as a people aspire to become. What role do we want to play in this new global order that is taking place? And an analogy I'll give is, if you have a train with, say, one engine and tons of bogies, you will only reach a limited amount of speed. But if you have maximum or multiple of those bogies have in self-propelled engines and everybody pushing forward, then it quantifies and adds on the total speed with which we'll be able to reach our target. And that is what we need to understand in terms of our youth, the role of the youth, the role of all of us in this trajectory. What I'll gradually do now is take you to some of my instances or some of my interactions which will give you a hint of how the global youth space, for example, is turning and what sort of opportunities are coming up. And with me, I think you will see a reflection of the growing importance and the personification of Bharat in the global era. I remember exactly 1 month back, I was sitting in Beijing and we were having the Tsinghua Global Youth Dialogue. So Tsinghua University is one of the topmost universities. And one of my mentors over there, Mr. Eric Solem, so he was the former Under Secretary General of UN, he was giving a speech and he saw me and he mentioned that right now Indians are thinking globally and they want to approach a lot of problems in the global arena, not just restrict to India. And he gave a very splendid example. He said there's a company called Ola in India which is working with the motive, and listen very carefully, Uber for the West, Ola for the rest. So you're basically taking the vision ahead. Now companies like Ola are not thinking just to cater to the Indian market, but expansion into different spheres. That mindset shift is sort of coming into play, right? Why is it that we need to always wait for some, for example, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, etc. to invest in India to bring their innovation or to hire our people, but rather why not we take the initiative and start things on our own? And I think a broader debate around, or I'd say discussion and narrative shift around entrepreneurship has been taking place in that direction. But what is further needed is how do we get a global vision around the same? That we take our efforts, our focuses, our interactions, everything one notch ahead, not just restrict ourselves to the geography. So the limitations of the geography and the mentality needs to change first of all. Because if we are able to do that, that would bring in itself a lot of transformations. Another instance I think that very sharply resonates with me is last March, I think it was in Nigeria, and we were hosting the Commonwealth Youth and Students Summit for Africa, and all the African student and youth leaders were there. And the organizers, we were standing on the stage with a few Nigerian ministers. And I whispered 3 golden words to the youth minister of Nigeria. And after hearing those words, mind you, he asked and in fact announced that this guy should stand in the center of the stage because that's very important. Any guesses for what those 3 words were? I just said, I am Indian. And he announced that India is our foremost partner, and if somebody from India has come, that means they have to be on the center of the stage because they've been continuously facilitating and supporting us. And those are the moments when you realize what is in progress, what has been able to be achieved in the past few years, and also puts an onus on us to responsibly take those ideas forward, that image forward, and in our own processes and ways, and in the ways that we can contribute, take those things forward. And this I'm talking about merely a youth and student summit, not even the heads of governments or ministers coming together. But the role that, for example, an Indian can play in bringing together Africa and the different youth and student leaders and the recognition that the leaders over there give to their role, and at the same time the acceptance that is there, is what makes things come. Another instance that I would again take, which would in fact further take the narrative, is that few months back again I was in UK. And this I'm talking about the opportunities that would be coming up. I asked one of my friends who is from South Korea, and I asked him, what is the situation that is going around in terms of population, demography and all. And his response was like, bro, you look at the countries, people are talking Japan, China, etc. Population are declining, right? And sometimes they might have some sort of population declines and all. For us, we will go extinct in 100 years. Our fertility rate is 0.78, which means people are simply not going to have kids, they're not having families, and we do not have people to work. So our economy would certainly crash because we have no other alternative. And same or similar is the condition for a lot of East Asian countries, a lot of Western and European countries, And everybody is sort of in a situation where they're looking for young people, for people with talent, and this is where India is coming up as a reliable talent pool. In fact, one of the things that we did at the G20 summit was push forward a mechanism to recognize skills training in different countries and facilitate the migration. And I remember, I think it was during the G20 Youth Summit in the night around 1 a.m. we were sitting, different delegates, and I just put up this proposal. As I said, there are some countries that might need some of the Indian people to basically sustain their economies. And trust me, 11 to 12 of those 20 countries just shot up and said, we want people. We want Indians to come to our country and take over jobs because we do not have any other option. And this is one of the various manifestations wherein we see Bharat rising as a Vishwaguru, Indians taking leadership roles. I don't think we need to repeat again or mention about Rishi Sunak and how he has taken wonderfully over the reins of the United Kingdom. And with a very powerful stamp, he is not shy, he is not guilty of his Indian identity. In fact, he is very, very proud of the same. And in fact, just recently, he said that I am very proud to be the first British Asian Prime Minister. And more so, another person who crashed that Conservative Party leadership speech was Ms. Akshata Murthy, who was talking to the ruling party of UK, giving them discussions and pointers about her husband. And interestingly, Ms. Murthy still continues to be an Indian citizen and not a British citizen. And her words, mark you, which stuck with me was when she invited Rishi Sunak, that let me invite my best friend and partner and your Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, because he, in fact, is not her Prime Minister. Those are the moments when you sort of see things happening, but also sort of responsibility that comes up for us in the youth space to take over, to positively carry forward those spirits, and essentially become the voice of our perspectives. Now, there's a global, I'd say, interest and peculiar, I'd say, hawkish vision on India. Because everybody wants to engage with India. They have realized that the potential and the future lies there. We saw what's happening with Canada, but still Justin Trudeau has to continuously keep on saying that we want to keep on engaging and build stronger ties with India because there simply is an alternative. As countries go on to move away from China in terms of their supply chains, their technology reliance, the only other alternative, and mind you, the country with the largest population and the largest youth population in the world, that is India, is the only option that they can basically partner with in the long term as an alternative. And for that to happen, again, it cannot really happen by the government's vision and the government taking the forward. It has to happen at a very holistic level, and each and every single one of us sitting over here taking initiatives in our own styles. A lot of you, I think, how many of you are basically interested in international relations, public policy, some of those things? Can you please raise hands? Perfect. I see a lot of hands up there. And now, if I would have asked how many of you actually want to develop a specialization in a very particular domain or a very particular country in their foreign policy, in their domestic structures, has planned to study their language, go into their country, study over there, and in-depth understand their country, I would not find a lot of hands raised. Is there anyone? And I see 2 to 3 hands. Maximum hands have essentially gone down. That is the thing, right? Now, if we plan to become the Vishwaguru, or if we plan to reach that zenith, then each and every single one of us needs to start competing at the global level. We need to plan to be the best in that space, not just the best in India. And that level of competence, understanding needs to gradually seep in. Only then would we be able to compete at that level. So what I'll do right now, as I've already said, is that I'm talking and briefly going through some of my experiences and interactions and essentially giving a brief of how things are moving. So I was in Beijing again, and I was having an interaction with their youth ministry. And in the international cooperation cell, one of the key persons just comes up to me, and guess what the first thing she said to me? She said, "Namaste, मेरा नाम राज है, आपका नाम क्या है? मैं 4 साल कलकत्ता में पढ़ी हूँ." You're understanding So now understand the depth in which countries such as China are investing in their international relations, in their youth space to build those ties. They're not superficially reading some articles or some research papers, but putting in investment. If we need to compete, each of us needs to identify our core areas and build on those skills. If we need, I don't know how many, if I would ask, our China scholars are there in India who are working in the government or in different capacities, who actually, for example, understand China, who understand Mandarin, who have stayed in China, or let it be true for any of the other countries in the world, except if you cut US, UK, etc., where a lot of people do go to. Do we have that sort of understanding? I don't think so. And this is where we need to start building up. The government level, a lot of developments are taking place. What is important is that we take things into our own hands gradually and become the voices. For how long would we depend on a New York Times or a BBC to tell us about what's happening in India or what's happening in Britain? When would we get domestic brands coming up and giving a commentary from an Indian perspective and point, and not just one but multiple, and give them the same sort of credibility that we give to those brands? For that, we would need people who are skilled and ready to serve the country and work with a strongly Indian perspective in mind. Last year, when I was invited to Strasbourg, France, for a workshop by the Organizing Bureau of European School Student Union. I know this concept would look very strange to a lot of you, where we only have student councils or unions at the school level. To think of a student union, school student union at a national and then a European level. And then they were having a discussion on decolonizing school curricula. And I unfortunately couldn't go due to visa issues. And I was checking the photographs on WhatsApp and I saw that in one of the sessions, 4 of them, one German friend of mine, one Spanish, one French, and one British, were basically giving a 1-page presentation to their peers on what was colonization in India and how is the curriculum in India. Which to many of us should be shocking, because we are not in those spaces to basically talk about our own rights and our own perspectives. And essentially, we need to build and think in that direction. Finally, I'll end up with very core instance, something that happened at the G20 Youth Summit about how do negotiations actually take place. I think you would have heard in speeches of India being the bridge between the global north and the global south, the bridge between the west and the east. And in the G20 Youth Summit, we were having some of these discussions, which suddenly the negotiations broke down on topics such as democracy, climate change, etc., because some of the countries were not really comfortable. And in fact, if anybody studies, some of the G20 countries are not democracies. So what we did is we just called up the administration and said, we need one room for the night and one bus to get everybody from the gala dinner to the room. We negotiated throughout the night and still there could be no consensus, because one of the countries proposed that if you want to have the word democracy, then you should also have the word monarchy. So you name it Shared Future, Youth in Democracy and Monarchy, which again was not acceptable to a lot of people, and similar such discourses and discussions happened. Everybody was continuously coming up to me and saying that we have these red lines and we need these concerns taken up. Everybody was looking up to India, to Bharat, to ensure that everybody comes on the same page. Despite all of that, in the morning there was no consensus. It was announced and there would be no communique. Everybody went back to the hotel crying. We still stuck around. We got the conflicting parties together. We sat down for another 3 hours, negotiated on and off multiple proposals, and finally reached a communique in which there was no conflict on Bharat's part, but the conflict was between the global north and the global south. We brought them together, everybody had hopes and aspirations on us. We took those people to the hotel lounge. In the hotel lounge, we sat and basically developed the consensus. And there onwards, the communique came forward. And when we went on to speak at the final signing ceremony, there were loud cheers for India, because everybody understood the role that we have played. With this, essentially, I just make one final call to each of you. Let G20 not be an year that came and went. Let it be an year of transformation for all of us, where we take charge for ourselves to ensure that whatever we do, we ensure that we take a global perspective with Indian roots and interest in mind. If we are organizing some conferences, let's involve other countries. If we are into sciences, let's do joint research. And if we are opening businesses, let's target a lot of other geographies. With this call for action, I'd like to end. Thank you.